I never planned to be in the slums of Elysium 7 that night. My shift at the med bay had ended hours ago, and I should have been drowning my exhaustion in a stiff drink at the nearest dive. Instead, my instincts, or maybe something deeper, had pulled me into the neon-drenched alleys of the station's underbelly. The air was thick with smoke, the scent of burned circuitry and desperation clinging to the metal walls. That's when I saw her, slumped against a rusted-out supply crate. Barely clinging to consciousness was a Zalarian warrior. Her emerald skin was smeared with blood, deep gashes torn into her side, and worst of all, her leg was gone. Not just severed, ripped away. The wound was fresh, raw, pulsing with a sickly blue light that told me she was running out of time. Hesitated. Not because I wanted to, but because saving her was a mistake. Solarians weren't just aliens. They were former enemies of humanity, a species whose war had left entire colonies in ruins. People still spat at their name. And here I was, staring at one, knowing damn well that helping her could cost me everything. Her golden eyes fluttered, open. They were dull, unfocused, but the moment they landed on me, something in them sharpened. Recognition, hope, or just the instinct of a dying warrior who refused to fade. She tried to speak, but all that came out was a pained gasp. I should have walked away. I should have left her to whatever fate had brought her to this alley. But instead I took a step forward, then another, and then I knelt beside her. "Don't move," I murmured, my fingers already pressing against the side of her throat, searching for a pulse. Weak, thready. Her body was shutting down. She blinked, sluggishly. "Why?" I ignored the question and reached for my medkit. I wasn't thinking, just acting, the way I had been trained to. The way my father, the man who had spent his life patching up the broken-in back-alley clinics, had taught me. I pulled out a dermal stabilizer and pressed it to her wound. The device hissed, sealing ruptured veins and stopping the worst of the bleeding. But it wasn't enough. Not even close. "You need a full region treatment," I muttered, mostly to myself. Her fingers twitched, barely grazing my wrist. "No. Can't. You don't have a choice." I could see it in her face. The fear, the shame. Solarians didn't beg for help. Their culture was built on pride, on strength. To rely on an outsider, especially a human, must have felt like a betrayal of everything she believed in. But pride wouldn't keep her alive. I shifted her weight, preparing to lift her. She winced, but she didn't fight me. Not that she had the strength to. "I'm getting you out of here," I said. She could have refused, could have spat in my face, but she didn't. Instead, she did the one thing I didn't expect. She closed her eyes and let me carry her into the night. I shouldn't have brought her here. The med bay I worked in was too public, too monitored. If anyone saw me treating a Zalarian, especially using restricted tech, I'd be arrested, exiled, or worse. Instead, I took her to the only place where the cameras didn't reach. My personal lab, hidden beneath an old repair shop on the outskirts of Elysium 7. The room was cramped, filled with outdated medtech, flickering screens, and the sharp scent of antiseptics. Not exactly the cleanest environment for a critical procedure, but it was her only shot. I set her down on the examination table, my hands already moving before my brain could catch up. She groaned in pain, her head rolling to the side. "This is a mistake." "No," I said, activating the scanner. Dying in a gutter would have been a mistake. Her golden eyes flickered open, weak but still sharp. "Why?" I didn't have an answer, so I ignored the question. The hollow scanner buzzed to life, mapping her injuries in intricate detail. Her missing leg wasn't a clean severance. Something had torn it away at the molecular level, leaving ragged edges where flesh and bone should have been smooth. A plasma weapon? No. Something worse. I swallowed hard. did this to you?" Silence. She didn't want to say, or maybe she didn't trust me enough to. I didn't press. Instead, I focused on what mattered. Saving her. I reached for my terminal and pulled up a restricted file, the limb regeneration protocol. This tech wasn't supposed to exist. The Federation banned it years ago after too many complications. Regrown limbs that turned against their hosts. Tissue rejection so violent it killed the patient. But I had perfected it. In secret. And now, I had to use it. "This is going to hurt," I warned. She huffed weakly. "I've had worse." I activated the regen field. The machine whirred, golden light spilling over her severed limb. Biogel flowed into the wound, knitting itself to her nervous system, bonding with her DNA. Then she screamed. Her body seized, muscles locking up as the regen tech forced her cells to rebuild at an unnatural speed. Veins bulged at her throat. Sweat slicked her skin. She was strong, but this was beyond pain. I grabbed her hand, squeezing tight. "Breathe through it." Her fingers crushed mine. Too strong, too desperate. But she didn't let go. The regen field pulsed, once, twice. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the light faded. I exhaled, my heart pounding. I was afraid to look. If I had miscalculated even the slightest genetic factor, her body could reject the new limb, or worse. But then, she stirred. Slowly, trembling, she lifted her head and looked down. Her leg was back, a perfect, seamless regeneration. No scarring, no deformities. Just whole. She flexed her toes, as if testing whether it was real. Her breath came shaky. "You did it." I nodded, still gripping her hand. "Yeah." She looked at me then, really looked at me. And in that moment, something in her expression changed. Not gratitude, not relief. Something else. I didn't know what it meant. But I knew one thing. I had just made a very, very dangerous mistake. I should have known it wouldn't be that easy. The moment the regen process finished, I felt it, that prickling unease, the sensation of stepping into a trap just before it snaps shut. She sat up slowly, flexing her newly regenerated leg, her expression unreadable. Her golden eyes flickered between me and the medtech I had used, something calculating behind them. For a moment I thought she might thank me. Instead, she whispered, "You just broke the law for me." I tensed. "Yeah, I noticed." She slid off the table, testing her balance. The transition from nothing to fully restored nerve function should have taken days to adjust to, but she moved with a warrior's efficiency. No hesitation, no weakness. That was the first sign something was wrong. The second came when my security grid crashed. My screen flickered. The emergency lockdown kicked in, a feature I had installed to keep the authorities from detecting my illegal work. But it wasn't the Federation at my door. It was the Syndicate. The comm system crackled to life, a cold, familiar voice slithering through the speakers. "Dr. Hale, we know you're in there. Step outside and we'll make this quick." Blood turned to ice. The Syndicate controlled the black market on Elysium 7, everything from weapons to biotech. If they had found me, it meant someone had sold me out, someone in this room. I turned to her. "Tell me you didn't." She didn't flinch. I didn't. But there was something in the way she held herself. Too still. Too ready. I had seen that stance before. Not fear. Preparedness. Like she knew this was coming. I took a step back, my hands curling into fists. "Then how did they find me?" The pounding on the door grew louder. More voices, more weapons being primed. "Does it matter?" she said quietly. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that this was just bad luck. But the timing. It was too perfect. She had been dying in that alley, alone, helpless. And yet, just minutes after I saved her, the most ruthless criminals on this station suddenly knew exactly where I was. No. She played me. I inhaled sharply. You used me. She met my gaze. Didn't deny it. Outside, the door's security locks hissed as the override sequence started. I had seconds to act. Trust her or run. The air between us crackled with tension. Then she did something I never expected. She grabbed my wrist and said, "If you want to live, follow me." And then she pulled me into the fire. I didn't have time to hesitate. The security locks hissed, the door buckling under pressure. The Syndicate wasn't here for negotiations. They were here to kill me, and probably her too. She pulled me hard, her grip surprisingly strong for someone who had been half dead an hour ago. "There's a way out," she said, voice low but urgent. I didn't trust her. Not even a little. But staying wasn't an option. I grabbed my med bag, every instinct screaming at me as I let her drag me toward the back of the lab. She moved with the precision of a soldier, fast, efficient, controlled. No hesitation, no wasted motion. That was what scared me most. This wasn't some helpless warrior I had saved. She was something else entirely. A panel slid open in the far wall, revealing a narrow maintenance tunnel. I had built this exit in case I ever needed to escape Federation authorities, not for an underground criminal syndicate. "They'll have the front blocked," I warned, stepping in after her. She shot me a look over her shoulder. "Then we go where they won't follow." I didn't ask what she meant, I just ran. Behind us, the door to the lab burst inward, and the first Syndicate enforcer stormed in. Plasma bolts scorched the walls as we slipped into the darkness. The tunnel reeked of oil and rust. Dim emergency lights flickered overhead as we moved fast. Too fast. My lungs burned, my pulse hammering in my ears. She barely seemed winded. I gritted my teeth. "So, are you going to tell me the truth now, or do I have to wait until I'm shot in the back?" She didn't slow. "I didn't sell you out." "Then how did they find us?" Silence. Guilt. That was all the confirmation I needed. I exhaled. Sharply. "That Regan tech, you knew I had it. That's why you let me save you." She glanced at me but didn't deny it. I shook my head. "Who are you really?" She hesitated, then finally answered. "My name is Veyra." Not a full truth, but more than I had before. "Great," I muttered. "And what's your plan, Veyra? Because I don't feel like dying for a stranger tonight." She stopped suddenly, pressing herself against the wall. I nearly crashed into her. "Shut up," she whispered. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not Syndicate boots. Something worse. I didn't breathe. Neither did she. A shadow passed over the tunnel entrance ahead. My gut twisted. Federation soldiers. The Syndicate. Wasn't the only one hunting her. Veyra turned to me, golden eyes sharp. Change of plans. And before I could react, she grabbed my hand and jumped straight into the abyss below. I didn't have time to scream. The tunnel ended in a sheer drop, a maintenance shaft plunging at least 10 stories down into the guts of Elysium 7. My stomach lurched as we fell, air rushing past my ears, my mind racing to figure out if this was how I died. Then, impact. Not with the ground, but with something soft, metallic, moving. Veyra had aimed us perfectly, landing us onto the roof of a transport skiff speeding through the lower districts. My breath hitched as the force nearly knocked me off balance, but she gripped my wrist tight, keeping me anchored. We weren't dead, but we weren't safe either. I twisted, catching a glimpse of the Federation soldiers at the top of the shaft. They had seen us, and they were already moving to cut us off. "What the hell was that?" I snapped. Veyra barely looked at me. "An escape. Next time, Maybe warn me before throwing me off a cliff? She didn't answer, her focus shifting to the skiff's controls. I could still feel the pulse of adrenaline in my veins, my mind struggling to piece together everything that had happened in the last hour. The Syndicate had come for me. The Federation was chasing her, and somehow I was caught between them. None of this made sense. Not until she said 3 words that changed everything. I am royalty. I blinked. Excuse me? She didn't hesitate this time. I'm not just any Zalarian. I am heir to the Solvaris throne. My brain stuttered. No. That can't be right. The Solvaris Empire collapsed years ago. She met my gaze, golden eyes burning, because the Federation made sure of it. I felt the weight of those words settle in my chest. The war, the massacres, the fall of her people. It had all been Federation orchestrated, and now they were hunting down the Bia, last remaining heir. I dragged a hand down my face. So let me get this straight. You, an exiled princess, who everyone thought was dead, just so happened to get caught in a Syndicate ambush and ended up in my clinic. And now both the biggest criminal network and the most powerful government in the system are after us. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Yes. I let out a breath. Great. Fantastic. That's just perfect. Veyra shifted toward me. I didn't plan for this. I didn't plan for you. Something in her voice made my stomach twist. Because for all the lies, for all the deception, I believed her. I exhaled slowly. All right. What's the play here? Because I don't think we'll survive a war between the Syndicate and the Federation. She hesitated. Then, quietly, she said, "We don't fight them." I frowned. Then what? Her golden eyes gleamed. "We steal something even bigger." I stared at her. What the hell does that mean? She turned toward the horizon, where the massive Federation warship hovered over the city. "We take back my empire." And just like that, I realized I wasn't just running anymore. I was about to start a revolution. I should have walked away, right there on that transport skiff, with the Syndicate closing in behind us and the Federation hunting us from above. I should have told Veyra no, but I didn't, because deep down, I knew she was right. The only way out of this wasn't to run. It was to steal something big enough to make both sides think twice before coming after us. And there was only one thing powerful enough to do that: the Eclipse Core. It wasn't just a power source. It was the power source, the beating heart of the Federation's orbital fleet, capable of fueling entire star systems, controlling planetary defense grids, and rewriting the balance of power in the galaxy. And it was currently locked away inside the Aegis, a Federation warship the size of a city, hovering just above Elysium 7. I shook my head, still struggling to process what she was asking. So let me get this straight. You don't just want to escape. You want to break into the most secure vessel in the galaxy, steal the core that powers it, and use it to overthrow the Federation. Veyra's golden eyes gleamed. Yes, I laughed. I couldn't help it. That's insane. She smirked. So is regenerating a missing limb with banned technology, but here we are. Damn it, she had a point. I exhaled, rubbing my temples. Even if I say yes, how do we even get aboard? Warships don't exactly have visitor parking. She turned back to the skiff's controls. We hijack someone who does. I frowned. What do you? Then I saw it. A Federation patrol shuttle was flying low, scanning the rooftops, clearly searching for us. Veyra didn't hesitate. She yanked a control lever, sending our skiff into a sharp turn, directly toward the shuttle. My eyes widened. No, this is a terrible idea. Veyra ignored me. Because of course she did. The Federation pilot. Inside the shuttle barely had time to react before we collided. The impact sent both vehicles spiraling. Our skiff crumpled against the side of the shuttle, sending sparks flying. I barely had time to unstrap myself before Veyra was already moving, kicking open a hatch and climbing inside the enemy ship. I scrambled after her, heart pounding. The pilot inside, a Federation officer, young, panicked, weapon already drawn, spun toward us. "Freeze!" Veyra didn't. She moved like lightning, closing the distance in a heartbeat. A single strike to his wrist sent his blaster clattering to the floor. Another to his throat had him gasping for air. By the time I stepped inside, he was unconscious. I swallowed hard. "Remind me never to piss you off." Veyra smirked. "Noted." I shook my head and dropped into the co-pilot seat, scanning the controls. This was a military-grade vessel. Top tier. Encryption. Biometric locks. AI-assisted flight. No way I could crack it fast enough. But then Veyra pulled something from her belt and pressed it to the console. A hijack key. I gaped at her. "Where did you get that?" Her smirk widened. "I have my ways." The moment she activated it, the shuttle's security systems flickered, then unlocked. The screens flooded with access codes, flight commands, clearance signals. We had just stolen a Federation ship. My hands tightened on the controls as I glanced at her. "Are we really doing this?" Veyra looked out the viewport, toward the looming warship in the sky. She met my gaze, eyes burning with purpose. "We're already dead if we don't." And with that, I took the controls, pointing us straight toward the Aegis, toward the heist of a lifetime. Stealing the shuttle was the easy part. Breaking into the Aegis, the most heavily fortified warship in the Federation fleet, that was suicide. And yet, as I gripped the flight controls, guiding us through the docking approach, I couldn't deny the rush of adrenaline. We were flying straight toward the lion's den, using stolen credentials, with nothing but a half-baked plan and sheer recklessness. The comm crackled to life. "Shuttle Zeta 19, state your purpose." My hands tensed on the controls. I glanced at Veyra. "Tell me you have a plan." She tapped a small device on her wrist, a voice modulator. With a flick of her fingers, her voice shifted, adopting a clipped, professional tone. "Medical transport." "Prisoner transfer." There was a pause. Then, "Authorization code." I swore under my breath. The hijack key had given us access, but it didn't generate passcodes. If they double-checked, we were fried. Veyra didn't hesitate. She leaned forward and said, "Override, Black Talon, Priority 1. The comm went dead. I held my breath, my pulse hammering. That wasn't a normal clearance code. That was a kill order. Then, "Acknowledged, Black Talon. Docking Bay 12 is prepped." I stared at her as the comm cut off. What the hell was that? Veyra exhaled. "The Syndicate had contingency codes for emergencies. I just used one." "You just impersonated a high-level assassin." She gave me a sideways look. "Would you rather have gotten shot down?" I shut my mouth and focused on docking. The Aegis loomed ahead, massive, imposing, bristling with firepower. A wrong move and we'd be space debris. But somehow the clearance worked. The docking bay doors hissed open, and I eased the shuttle inside, heart pounding. The moment we landed, uniformed officers approached, weapons holstered but ready. A tall woman in command armor stepped forward, eyes sharp. Captain Seraph Hale. I froze. Because that last name? That wasn't a coincidence. Veyra didn't know, but she had just walked us straight into the hands of my older sister. Seraph's gaze locked onto me, her expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here." Veyra tensed beside me. "You know her?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah, and if she figures out what we're doing, we're both dead." Veyra's fingers twitched toward her hidden blade. "Then let's make sure she doesn't." Seraph's eyes narrowed. "Step out, slowly." I took a breath, glancing at Veyra. We were seconds from disaster, and I had no idea how to get out of it. I stepped out first. Veyra followed. Her posture relaxed, But I knew better. Her fingers were inches from the concealed blade on her thigh, her golden eyes scanning for weaknesses, exits, weapons. Seraph, my sister, watched us with the cold, calculating stare of a seasoned soldier. She had changed since I last saw her. More scars, more authority. Less of the sister I once knew, and more of the Federation enforcer she had become. Her gaze flicked between me and Veyra. This doesn't make sense. You don't belong here, Cal. My throat tightened. Yeah, well, things change. Her eyes darkened. You're not a criminal. I exhaled slowly. Then don't treat me like one. A tense silence settled between us. Then, alarms blared. The overhead speakers crackled. Security breach detected. Unidentified shuttle confirmed. Stolen! Intruders on board! Seraph's face hardened. Veyra and I locked eyes. We were out of time. The guards reached for their weapons. Veyra moved first. In one fluid, blinding motion, she swept low, disarming the nearest soldier, her stolen blaster snapping up. But Seraph was faster. Before Veyra could fire, my sister had her rifle against my temple. Everything froze. Veyra's hands tightened around her blaster, but she didn't pull the trigger. Seraph's voice was steel. Call it off, Cal. Whatever this is, end it now. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering. I can't. Her jaw tensed. Why? Veyra's voice was quiet but deadly. Because the Federation destroyed my people, and we're taking back what's ours. Seraph's grip on her weapon didn't waver. You're stealing the Eclipse Core. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Seraph exhaled, the tiniest flicker of emotion crossing her face. Then, slowly, she did something I never expected. She lowered her rifle. Veyra's eyes narrowed. What game are you playing? Seraph glanced at me. You really think you can pull this off? I hesitated. Then, I nodded. She studied me for a long moment. Then, in a voice so quiet only I could hear, she said, Then run. Now. My breath caught. Veyra blinked. Wait. What? Seraph's voice hardened. I'll stall them for as long as I can, but if you're serious about taking the core, you need to move. Now. Veyra and I exchanged a look. This was our only shot. I nodded once in silent thanks. Seraph didn't return it, but she didn't stop me either. Then we ran, straight toward the Eclipse Core chamber, toward a future we couldn't predict. And as the alarms blared and the warship trembled around us, I realized this wasn't just a heist anymore. This was the beginning of a revolution. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would